Welcome to the inside of the Ferrari Purosangue. My name's Ciro De Siena. Actually happen to be half Italian. So today we're going to make a film about an Italian stallion. We're also going to make a film about the Ferrari Purosangue.
Think of a car, any car. Yes, Cars.co.za. Let's find what moves you.
So let's look at the supercar SUV landscape. There's the Bentayga, which is basically a boat. There's the Cayenne, which is cheap compared to this, very cheap. You could buy about 5 of them. There's the Urus, which is possibly the wildest of the supercar SUVs. And then there's this. This car was a bit late to the party, but my word, have they arrived at the party. So back when Enzo Ferrari started Ferrari, he said quite a few times on the record that the only reason he made and sold cars is so he could pay for his racing. Then fast forward 50 odd years and Ferrari goes public, which means that they are now beholden to their shareholders. Shareholders like to make money, and so they sat down with the Ferrari engineers and they said, please make us an SUV. The Ferrari engineers left the room and swore loudly many times. And then they all sat down, they were like, they want an SUV. Let's go. Let's give them a SUV. We're gonna do it the Ferrari way. So part of the annoyed engineers' plan was to take the best engine Ferrari's ever made, the V12 6.5 liter from the 812 Superfast, leave it naturally aspirated, and so make this the only naturally aspirated V12 SUV in the world. It's also the fastest SUV in the world and tops out at 310 kilometers an hour. But not only did they take the V12 from the 812 Superfast and stick it in here, they even set about improving the engine. So they redesigned the crank a little bit. They even worked out a way to finish the cam lobes so that they're smoother, so that there's less friction, so that they rotate faster. That's the kind of attention to detail that Italians are not known for. And so you end up with what is, in my opinion, the best sounding SUV of all time. In fact, this is one of the best sounding cars I've ever driven, but we're gonna get there in a little bit. Let me just tell you a couple more things. So, I sat down last night and I read the press release for the Ferrari Purosangue, and I even understood some of it. It is very long. I'll put a link to it in the description below. And I'd like to challenge you. I'm gonna try explain this car's suspension system, which is unique in the world. And I'm gonna give it my best go, but I want you to read the press release, and then if you can explain to me in layman's terms how the suspension in this car works, I will send you some Cars.co.za merchandise. Because I had to read that press release about 15 times. And to be honest, I'm still not completely sure that I understand how the suspension works. So Ferrari worked with a Canadian company called Multimatic. Multimatic developed a active damper for the car, but it's not active in the traditional sense of the word. So if you hit a button, it doesn't just go from soft to hard. The dampers are actually working. They're pushing against the body of the car and keeping the car flat. They're not hydraulic. It's not air. It's a completely new system. It's known as a spool valve, and it has motors in the spool valves or next to them, which have 3 gears which operate the dampers. And basically what this does is it keeps the car completely flat, and it also manages the contact patch of the tires. So it's sort of working on the camber of the tires all the time. That system is connected to Ferrari's very clever ESC system, which is constantly monitoring hundreds of parameters. They all talk to each other and they feed back and they decide what's the best way to react, what's the best way to activate the dampers to get the most grip out of the car. Right, that is enough car nerdism. If you're still with me, thanks for sticking it out. This is the bit where it's starting to get quite exciting. So I would like to experience what a 533 kilowatt, 725 horsepower, 725 Newton meters naturally aspirated V12 feels like in an SUV. So we flick it into manual down here. We flick the Maranello into sport. That opens up the exhaust valves, sharpens up the throttle, speeds up the gear changes, makes the gear changes a bit harsher. I don't know how to use launch control in this car, and if I try to figure out, we'd probably run out of daylight. So what I'm going to do is left foot brake. Let's see if it'll let me build some revs. No, soft limiter 1.5. Let's come off the brake and see what happens. Bit of slip. The red line is at 8,250 RPM. What's incredible is that even though it's rear wheel drive, you actually have to fight this thing. It squirms under full throttle. But again, to get one up on cars like the Lamborghini Urus, they designed the chassis from scratch using high tensile steel, using lots of alloys, carbon fiber roof. And so this car weighs 230 kilograms less than a Lamborghini Urus. And that is a lot. That's like a whole Bucky's Buerta. The way this car picks up revs absolutely blows my mind. In fact, this car could never be a manual. You wouldn't be able to keep up with the engine. You would just look like a gorilla playing the drums. Clutch, gears. No, this is better as a flappy paddle. God, it corners flat. That is ridiculous. The body control is absolutely out of this world. God knows how much the suspension costs. God help you if it breaks. Although Ferrari gives you a 7-year maintenance plan, which is quite impressive actually. Interestingly, even though it is technically all-wheel drive, it is predominantly rear-wheel drive, and it only engages the front gearbox on the front axle on the front of the engine when it needs it, when it decides that you've run out of talent and it needs to pull you straight. It is amazing how accurately you can place the nose of this car. You know exactly what the front wheels are doing all the time. Listen how it blips the throttles on the upshifts. Oh, 7,000, 8250 rev limiter. What the hell? I can't believe how hard this car wants to be driven. This is a driver's car. What is remarkable about this car is you can put it into comfort, Tyler mode, or ice. Tyler mode is called wet. Comfort. Flick it into auto, and then it's a docile beast. You can go up into 8th, which improves fuel consumption, drops the revs, lovely for cruising. The tires, however, are very low profile, so you do feel imperfections in the road coming through even in comfort mode. But interestingly, even though this is a 4-seater GT with 4 heated seats, with 4 independently adjustable seats, it feels like a sports car. It feels like a supercar first, before a GT. What I'm very surprised about is the driving position. It feels like you're low in the car. So not only do you get a fairly commanding view of the road, but you also get to feel like you're part of the machine, like you're in the center of gravity rather than above it. And so you can feel the car pivoting around you, pivoting around your pelvis. If that makes sense. You want to pivot around my pelvis later? Are you bad? You want to pivot around my pelvis? Welcome to the part of the video where we take the car into the Cars.co.za office so we can shoot nice pretty shots and I can walk around the car and point at things. Okay, let's get nerdy. Even put my nerdy spectacles on. The thing about an SUV is it's very difficult to get the weight balance right. Just ask Lamborghini. And the way Ferrari have achieved their ideal weight balance, which they think is 49 front, 51 rear, that's how all their sports cars are set up, is they've split the drivetrain apart. So the gearbox is underneath the boot. The engine is obviously all the way at the front. Now the way you would traditionally set up an all-wheel drive setup is you'd run a prop shaft from the engine to the back of the gearbox. This is how, say, the Skyline is set up. Then you'd run another prop shaft back to the front axle onto the front diff. That increases the weight quite a bit, and Ferrari were going for as light a weight as possible. So the way they got around this is, let me just pop the bonnet and I'll show you. In front of the engine, underneath this massive, beautiful clamshell bonnet, look at the size of that thing. In front of the engine is another gearbox, a 2-speed gearbox. So power comes out the front of the block and the back. It's predominantly a rear-wheel drive car, and it only engages the front gearbox when it thinks you're about to run out of talent and it needs to pull the car straight. And here is the really remarkable thing about the way Ferrari have packaged this car. The nose starts over here, the engine starts over here, behind the front axle. Half of the engine is underneath the dashboard, and that means this is the world's first front mid-engined SUV, and that's why this thing handles so superbly. The driver's seat, the cockpit, the most important part of the car. Brand new Ferrari steering wheel, quite thin rimmed actually, not like Beamers where they go for, you know, more girth. And Ferrari have been doing this for a while. There's a good reason for it, but everything is on the steering wheel. So indicators are here. You press once, then press against to cancel. Lights, windscreen wipers over there, and your Maranello switch. Now, Maranello switch is actually named after a father and son team called Mane and Tino. It's not, I just made that up right now. You control everything in the car in front of you, and interestingly, the passenger also gets their own touchscreen. They can control climate, radio, seat heaters, that sort of things. And let me show you a couple of things as to how you actually operate the car. So one of the only disappointing aspects of this interior for me is the start button, because it's not actually a button, it's just over here. So I just wish it was something like you could really press, but it's just a sort of a, like that, which is a little bit of an anticlimax. Anyway, I think I could live with it. You do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and interestingly, Ferrari have ditched the sat-nav because you use it through your phone, so that must have saved them a couple of bucks, which is nice. And then to actually operate the car, foot on the brake, down into manual, A is for automatic, but it is really a beautiful design, and I love how this is all hand stitched. It's so well put together. It's a pretty exquisite interior, and interestingly, it's a little bit fussy but also minimalist. So for instance, here's your aircon controls. This knob rises up out of the dash, and that's how you control your air conditioning. Now I thought while I'm here I'd make a few phone calls to get a price on the rear tire. Okay, now let's get a quote.
Thank you for calling Tiger Wheel and Tire.
Let's get a quote on that.
To improve our customer experience.
Thank you for calling Tiger Wheel and Tire. Captain is Darun.
Listen, can you give me a quote on a tire quickly?
Okay, what's the tire, sir?
Okay, it's a 315/3023.
In that tire, game is only 3 tires pull up with 2 per release in a Yokohama.
No, Bridgestone.
315/3023, eh?
Yeah. How much?
Only 2 per release in a Yokohama.
How much for a Pirelli?
The Pirelli one is 15,300 eh?
Per tire.
Per tire, and the other Pirelli one is 15,400 eh?
Nice. Okay, so 15K a tire. All right, man. Thank you so much for your help. Okay. Cheers.
No problem.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye. 15.5 grand a tire. Try not to get a puncture. The Purosangue is also Ferrari's first 4-door 4-seater. And the way you get into the back seats is like this. Thank you for behaving. Single hinged rear suicide doors. Look how wide they open as well. Getting in is pretty easy. And I've got good legroom and good headroom. So even though this car has a massive engine behind the front axle, there's still good legroom for rear passengers. Look, I must say these seats are pretty firm. The front seats are amazing. These are pretty firm. I don't know how happy I'd be doing long distance, but I do have my own aircon, which is nice, and some USB ports. And then because you've paid 15 million rand for the car, you can't expect your passengers to have to close the door themselves. So you just hit this button. In the extremely detailed press release, some of which I even understood, Ferrari says that this is the largest boot ever in a Ferrari. It's also the first one with an electric tailgate. And as you can see, it comfortably swallows 3.5 budget cooler boxes. But even though it doesn't look that big, it does have a little trick up its sleeve. So I'll remove these budget cooler boxes, being very careful to show the branding to the camera. There we go, it's my bonus sorted for the year. You can take this floor out and you got quite a lot more space. Just leave that at home or hide your gold bars or whatever it is you need to hide underneath there. The seats fold flat and there's Alcantara on the parcel shelf, which I've never seen before. It's very fancy. Helps pay off that 15 million rand. But as you can see, quite a shallow boot, and that's because, as I mentioned, there's a gearbox underneath. The thing is, the engineers could have done this the easy way, right? They could have gone with the small V8 bi-turbo from the 488. That would have been easier to package the car. It would have been way easier to get it behind the front axle, much shorter block. Would have made it easier to build the cabin and make the cabin spacious. But they were like, no, we're going NA V12 and we're going to create legroom in the back. Look, interestingly, it's not a small car. It looks compact, but it's a bit of an illusion. This car is longer and wider than my Discovery 4. It's almost as long as a Mercedes S-Class, and it's much wider than an S-Class. It is actually a big car. When you consider in the modern era, where BMW M4 weighs 1,800 kilograms, and a Jaguar F-Type weighs 1,800 kilograms, 2 tons for a 4-seater SUV with a V12 6.5 liter, that's actually pretty incredible engineering. And I just love that this is a traditional ICE drivetrain. There's no hybrid nonsense going on in here. And we know Ferrari's very good at hybrid. The LaFerrari, amazing car. This SF90, amazing car. In fact, some of the tech from the SF90 is in here, but not the hybrid stuff. This is an old-fashioned driver's car. It's an old-fashioned performance car. And in a world where everything is going hybrid and electric, this is quite possibly the most wonderful dinosaur that I've driven in a really long time. So, what do you have to pay for all of this? Well, base price, 9.7 million rand, which is roughly twice what you would pay for an Urus. So you could buy 2 Uruses, his and hers. However, having driven it now, I understand why it is twice the price of an Urus. And I gotta be honest with you, I didn't want to like this car. I hadn't seen one in real life and I found it a bit underwhelming in pictures, but this makes you feel special. This is an event to drive this car. So there's one on our site for 14.5 million. So it's obviously been spec'd, and you know, you can go nuts when you spec a Ferrari. You can go absolutely mental. So really, even though base price is 9.7, you'll never pay that. You've got to spend about 15. And if you go onto our app and use our handy finance calculator, and if you go 60 months at prime, 11.25 with no deposit, then this car will only cost you 468,000 rand a month on installments. And that's not even including insurance. It's very exciting. So for 15 million rand, God, I could set up my whole life for 15 minutes. I could have a huge house with a huge garage with 20 cars in it. But this isn't just a car. This is an experience. And as they say, experiences are priceless.
What's the car with Cars.co.za? This is Karen. Her name's not really Karen. You just know the hooter on her car is really well used. Beep! Now think of a car. Any car. Yes, we have it. Cars.co.za. Let's find what moves you.